Well, let's get started. Good morning. Welcome to the webinar, All the Dirt on VCI, your secret weapon to reduce rust and increase sales. Now that we know a little bit about how rust forms, and we know that there's different kinds of rust, and you know the top 5 reasons your customers could be getting rust, I think the great question to ask ourselves is, well, why care about it? You would never eat there. And the same thing is true about corrosion and rust. You and your customers don't have to accept corrosion and rust as part of your process. Not only is it not great for their reputation, but rust is expensive. And the best way to show you how rust is expensive is to show you what we call the rust iceberg. So just like the Titanic, it did not sink because of the iceberg that it saw sticking out of the water. It sank because of running into the iceberg that it saw underneath the water, or what we call, for a rust iceberg, hidden cost. So when you look at that picture, and you can see on the iceberg the parts that are sticking out, those are the visible costs we all know, like sorting or reworking the metal. But look underneath the water. And these are the hidden costs. And there's opportunity lost in sales. And there's something I want you to look at on the left-hand side of your screen called an 8D meeting. We're going to talk specifically about an 8D meeting for a moment. If you don't know what an 8D meeting is, it's just a common term in the automotive industry for the 8 disciplines it takes to fix a problem. And the idea behind that 8D meeting is we need to identify, correct, and eliminate a reoccurring problem. So an example of something that could be brought to an 8D meeting is the cost of rust. So here's the situation you bring to that meeting. You have 50,000 units, and those units are worth $1. And then if you look over on the right-hand side of your screen, you would say, okay, 25% of those units were rejected due to rust. At first you might think, oh, well, that's about $12,000, which is a lot. But what we want you to be able to show your customers is the additional consequences of rust, or those additional costs. The customer communication, the internal meetings, the de-rusting, the reshipping. We have broken this down for you in the real cost of rust slide. But what I want to share with you today is that we have a specific video for you. We have a specific video for you that is the real cost of rust. If you are constantly the person who is being asked to drive the cost of VCI down, to be able to lower your cost, then you need to type in the box to Ryan and say, send me the video to the real cost of rust, or send me the link to the real cost of rust video. It will walk you through how to explain the cost of an 8D meeting to your customers. So thus far, we've talked a lot about corrosion and rust and food poisoning, but I promise I am about to make this presentation a lot more optimistic. You can prevent rust, and there are multiple ways that you can prevent rust. There's paint and coatings and oil and RP liquids. VCI is just one of those ways, but it's the one that we are going to talk about today. So go ahead and type in the box. And don't worry, not everyone can see your answers. Have you ever sold VCI? If you have, just type yes. But if you haven't, then we're especially glad that you're here, but go ahead and type no.
So for some of you on this webinar, you might be very familiar with ARMOR, but for others, you might need a little introduction or reintroduction to ARMOR. So at ARMOR, while we manufacture rust prevention and rust removal products, we know that our purpose is to protect your brand, your customers' brands, your parts and your customers' parts, and most importantly, your reputation. Well, and how we do it? To hit that very first bullet point you see on your screen, which is VCI, or vapor corrosion inhibiting nanotechnology. And you'll hear me call it VCI today. You might hear me call it rust prevention, or maybe I'll say the whole name, vapor corrosion inhibiting nanotechnology. Now on your screen right now, I think another bullet point that you might find most interesting is that second bullet point from the bottom, which is over 90% of Fortune 500 companies, well, they rely on ARMOR products. So here's how we're going to break the webinar down today. We're going to talk for just a few minutes in the beginning about the nuts and bolts of VCI. What is VCI? Then we're going to spend the bulk of the time on our top 10 on why it pays to know where your VCI comes from. And then last, we're going to wrap it up with an expose on the real cost of rust, and it's a video that we're going to watch just a couple minutes. So we'll go ahead and get started with that first bullet point, which is about VCI. So if you work with metal or your customers work with metal, you know that you only need these three things in order to have rust. You need metal, you need air, and you need moisture. And if you have those three things, then you are going to have rust. But you can prevent rust. And the way that we're going to talk about preventing rust today is VCI. So here's just your high-level overview on VCI. If you look at your screen right now, that bottle right in the middle of your screen, that represents VCI. And for VCI to work, it needs what we call a carrier. And on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see in this example, it's craft paper. And that craft paper is coated, sometimes we say in the industry, it's impregnated with VCI. And then you can take your metal part and you can put it into that craft paper, wrap it up, and you have rust prevention on your metal. Now here's another example. We've just switched the carrier of VCI. So we've swapped out craft paper and we've added poly, and that poly is extruded with VCI. So you take your metal part, you put it into that poly bag, you close it up, and again, you have rust prevention on that metal. Now, I love this image on your screen right now. I think it really helps to visualize how VCI works. So VCI is represented in those little white dots you see on your screen right now. And VCI is volatile, which just means that it wants to leave the carrier that it's in. It's attracted to the metal. It puts a barrier on that metal, and it keeps out that air and that moisture and those contaminants, those things that can cause rust. Now you might be asking yourself, well, how, Chris? And a big thank you for myself for spending 30 minutes with us today. When we close out the webinar, a survey does come up. 1's the lowest, 5's the highest. We'd love if you rate the webinar. And then also, we'd love to hear from you any content. So anything that you want to learn about, just put it in that survey. So for myself, for my Chris, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye now.